It's a quiet Saturday morning, the kind that smelled like gasoline and coffee at the edge of a small town. A group of bikers pulled into a worn-out gas station just off the highway. Their engines rumbled loudly before dying down one by one, leaving behind the soft hum of country music from the convenience store's old speaker. The men were tough-looking, their leather jackets covered with patches and road dust, but they weren't bad people. They were just wanderers who loved the road. Among them was Daniel, the one everyone seemed to follow. He wasn't the biggest or loudest, but he had a calm way about him that made others listen. He walked inside to grab a bottle of water when he noticed something unusual through the glass door. Outside, standing near the edge of the parking lot, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 or 11, wearing a jacket that was too big for him and holding a small old bicycle. His shoes looked worn, his hands were red from the cold, and his face had that look only hardship could shape. Quiet, serious, but full of something deeper than fear. Daniel walked out slowly, unscrewing the cap from his water bottle. "Hey there, kid," he said in a gentle tone. "You lost or something?" The boy shook his head. He looked at Daniel's boots, then up at the big motorcycles lined up near the pumps. He seemed nervous, but he took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Please, mister," he said softly, his voice almost breaking. "Will you buy my bike?" The group turned to look at him. One of the bikers let out a short laugh, thinking it was a joke, but the boy didn't smile. He held onto his bike tightly, his knuckles white around the handles. Daniel frowned a little. "Why would I buy your bike, kid? Looks like it's your only ride." The boy looked down and swallowed hard before saying the words that made everyone stop moving. "Because my mom hasn't eaten in 2 days." The air seemed to freeze around them. Even the radio inside the store sounded distant now. Daniel stared at him for a moment, not sure if he'd heard right. The boy looked up again, eyes glassy but steady, as if he'd practiced this speech in his head before coming here. He said his mom had been sick for a while. She used to work but couldn't anymore, and things had gotten worse. The little money they had was gone, and he couldn't stand seeing her weak. So that morning he decided to try selling the one thing he owned that someone might actually buy. His bicycle. One of the bikers, a big man named Troy, knelt down beside him and said, "You sure you're telling us the truth, kid? People say a lot of things to get money." The boy nodded quickly. "I'm telling the truth. You can come and see her if you don't believe me." His voice cracked on that last sentence. He wasn't begging. He wasn't trying to trick anyone. He just sounded tired, the kind of tired no child should ever feel. Daniel felt something in his chest twist. He had seen a lot of rough things in his life. People lying, stealing, fighting. But there was no lie in this boy's eyes. He crouched down so he could meet his gaze. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy hesitated, almost like he was afraid of saying it too loudly. "Noah," he whispered. "And your mom?" "Her name's Anna. She's home. She doesn't like me asking strangers for help, but I didn't know what else to do." Daniel nodded slowly, his mind already made up. "You live close by?" "Not far," the boy said. "It's down the old road past the tracks." The rest of the group exchanged unsure looks. They had places to be, but Daniel wasn't the kind of man to turn his back on something like this. He had been raised rough himself, knew what it was like to be hungry and to pretend you weren't. He stood up and looked at the others. "All right," he said simply. "Let's go see what's going on." The boy's eyes widened. "You really mean it?" "Yeah, I do," Daniel said. "We'll take a look. Lead the way, kid." Noah smiled for the first time. Just a small one, quick and shy, before he jumped onto his little bike and started pedaling down the road. The bikers followed behind slowly, their engines rumbling quietly so they wouldn't scare him. The road turned into gravel, then dirt, winding between old oak trees and empty fields. Daniel watched the boy's thin shoulders as he pedaled hard, his jacket flapping behind him like a flag. There was something about him, maybe the way he kept looking back to make sure they were still coming, that made Daniel's heart ache. After about 10 minutes, they reached a small, falling-apart house on the edge of the woods. The roof was missing shingles, and the porch looked like it had been patched together too many times. A faded curtain moved slightly behind a cracked window. Noah jumped off his bike and ran up to the door. "Mom," he called out. "It's me, and I brought some people," a weak voice answered from inside. "Noah, who's with you, baby?" Daniel stepped forward and said softly, "Ma'am, we're just friends." "Don't worry." The door creaked open. A woman in her 30s stood there leaning against the frame. Her face was pale and her hair was tied back loosely. She tried to smile, but it was clear she was exhausted. "I'm sorry," she said right away, her voice shaky. "Whatever he told you, I didn't send him. He just worries too much." Daniel shook his head. "No need to apologize. The boy said you haven't eaten in 2 days. That true?" Her eyes lowered and she hesitated before nodding slightly. "I've been sick. Couldn't get to work. It's been hard." Noah looked at her, almost pleading. "I told you I'd find a way, Mom." The woman wiped her eyes and whispered, "You shouldn't have done that, sweetheart." Daniel's heart sank. He had seen hunger before, but there was something about this scene, the boy's small bike, the tired woman, the quiet house, that made it hit different. He turned to his group. "Let's grab some food from town," he said. "She needs it now." One of the bikers nodded and kicked up his stand. On it, he sped off down the dirt road. Daniel stayed behind with Noah and his mom. He asked if she needed a doctor, but she shook her head. "I just need rest and a little food. My son's been doing everything he can." She smiled faintly at Noah. "He's a good boy." While they waited, Noah showed Daniel the small shed where he kept his bike tools. Inside were old cans, a half-empty toolbox, and a few pieces of metal. "I used to fix things with my dad before he passed away," he said quietly. "I thought maybe if I fix bikes for people I could earn a little money. But no one wants to buy from a kid." Daniel didn't know what to say. He just put a hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "You did good, kid. Real good." When the other bikers returned, they brought bags full of groceries and bread, soup, milk, even some fruit. They unpacked everything right there in the kitchen, and Noah's mom tried to thank them through tears. Daniel told her it was no trouble at all. "You take care of yourself. The world's got enough trouble. You don't need to face it alone." She smiled weakly. "You're good people," she said. As the bikers got ready to leave, Noah ran outside to say goodbye. Daniel crouched down beside him and said, "Keep that bike, all right? Don't you ever sell it. It's yours." Noah nodded, clutching the handlebars tightly. "Thank you, sir." Daniel smiled, but something about leaving didn't feel right. As they rode away, he kept looking in his mirror, watching the boy and that broken house fade into the distance. That night, as they sat by the fire at their usual stop, Daniel couldn't shake the image from his head, the boy's trembling voice, the empty cupboards, the mother trying to stay strong. He knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end of the story. The next morning, he told his crew they were riding back. There was something more they could do, something that would change not just the boy's life, but all of theirs. The next morning, Daniel woke up early, long before the others. The sky was still gray and the smell of wet grass filled the air around their campsite. He sat by the dying fire, poking the ashes with a stick, thinking about the boy and his mother. Something about that house wouldn't leave his mind. He had seen plenty of hard times before, but this one hit different. Maybe it was the boy's courage. Maybe it was the way he had stood there, trying to sell the only thing he had to help his mom. When the rest of the bikers got up, they could tell Daniel wasn't his usual self. Troy poured him a cup of coffee and asked, "Still thinking about that kid?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, I can't shake it off. That woman and her boy. They're out there struggling. We can't just ride away like nothing happened." The group went quiet. They weren't rich men. They were just regular folks who loved the open road, but they all respected Daniel. And when he spoke with that kind of tone, they listened. "What are you thinking?" one of them asked. Daniel looked toward the horizon. "We go back. I want to see how they're doing. Maybe there's more we can do than just bring food." No one argued. They packed up their gear, started their engines, and rode out again. The sound of their bikes echoed across the empty road, the morning wind brushing against their faces. When they reached the old dirt road leading to Noah's house, Daniel felt that same ache in his chest. The small house looked even sadder in daylight. The paint was peeling and the roof sagged on one side. But there was something else too, hope. The boy was outside trying to fix a loose chain on his bike. When he saw them, he dropped his tools and ran toward the gate with a big smile. "You came back," he said, his voice full of excitement. Daniel smiled. "Of course we did. We wanted to check on you and your mom." The door opened and Anna stepped out looking a little better than before. Her face was still pale, but she had color in her cheeks now. "You really didn't have to come back," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. We wanted to. How are you feeling? I'm a bit stronger today, she said, smiling faintly. Thanks to what you all did yesterday. My son hasn't stopped talking about it. Noah grinned proudly. Mom ate breakfast today, he said like it was the best news in the world. The bikers smiled. Daniel looked around at the house again, noticing the broken steps and the torn screen door. He had fixed worse things before. He turned to Anna and asked, Mind if we take a look around? Maybe there's something we can help fix. Anna looked surprised. You've already done more than enough, she said quickly. You don't owe us anything, Daniel smiled kindly. We know. But sometimes people just want to help because it's the right thing to do. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right. But only if you'll stay for lunch. I can make something. The bikers agreed, and soon the small yard was alive with noise. Troy started inspecting the porch. Another guy fixed a loose shutter, and Daniel helped Noah clean out the front yard. The boy was full of questions and about motorcycles, about traveling, about the world beyond their little town. Do you go everywhere on those bikes? He asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Pretty much, Daniel said, wiping sweat from his forehead. We ride wherever the road takes us. No boss, no deadlines, just open sky. That sounds amazing, the boy said. I want to do that one day. Daniel looked at him and smiled. You can. You've got the spirit for it. As they worked, Daniel noticed the house had a few more problems than he thought. The roof leaked, some walls were soft from water damage, and the back door barely hung on its hinges. It was clear the place needed more than a quick fix. Inside, Anna was cooking what little she had, soup made from the groceries the bikers brought. The smell drifted out the open window, mixing with the scent of fresh wood and oil. For a moment, it felt like life was coming back into that old house. When lunchtime came, everyone sat around the small wooden table. It was crowded and noisy, but warm and full of laughter. Anna served bowls of soup, apologizing that it wasn't much, but Daniel told her it was perfect. Noah sat between them, talking nonstop about how he used to race his bike down the hill behind the house before the chain broke. One of the bikers laughed and said, Sounds like you're faster than us already. The boy grinned. Maybe one day I'll have a real bike like yours. Daniel ruffled his hair. You just might, kid. After lunch, the group stepped outside again. The sun was shining now, turning the dusty yard golden. Daniel took a deep breath, then said quietly, We can do more than this. Troy raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Daniel looked at the house. I mean, fix it properly. We've got the tools. We can get supplies. Why not give this family a real chance? The others nodded slowly. It wasn't something they planned, but no one disagreed. Helping people like this, it felt right. Before leaving that afternoon, Daniel told Anna they'd be back soon with a plan. She tried to protest again, but Daniel stopped her gently. Just let us do this, he said. We want to. She smiled, her eyes shining with tears she tried to hide. You don't even know us, she said quietly. Daniel looked at her and said, Maybe not. But sometimes you don't need to know someone to care about them. As they got on their bikes, Noah ran up to them, waving. I'll be here. I'll help too, he shouted. Daniel smiled and gave him a thumbs up before riding off. The sound of their engines faded into the distance, but the feeling they left behind stayed long after. On the way back to town, Daniel stopped at a small diner. The bikers sat around a table making plans. They decided to gather supplies, wood, paint, and maybe even get a few locals to help. One of them knew a guy who owned a hardware store, and another had a cousin who worked in roofing. Troy looked at Daniel and said, You're serious about this, huh? Daniel nodded. That kid tried to sell his bike just to feed his mom. The least we can do is make sure they've got a roof that doesn't leak. Over the next 2 days, they gathered everything they needed. The hardware store owner, once he heard the story, offered a discount. A local baker promised to send food. Even a few townspeople said they'd lend a hand. It was as if that one small act of honesty from a boy had started a ripple of kindness across the town. When the bikers finally returned to Noah's house with their truck full of supplies, Noah came running out again, eyes wide in disbelief. You really came back, he shouted. Daniel laughed. Told you we would, didn't I? Anna stood on the porch, her hands covering her mouth. What is all this? She asked. Repairs, Daniel said simply. We're fixing this place up. She shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, Daniel said. Just let us work. And so they began. Troy started on the roof, replacing broken shingles. Two of the bikers worked on painting the walls while Daniel and Noah fixed the porch steps together. The boy never stopped smiling. He kept bringing nails, tools, and water for everyone, trying to help however he could. At one point, Daniel noticed him watching closely as he hammered a board. "You learning something, kid?" he asked. Noah nodded eagerly. "Yeah, I want to fix things like you one day," Daniel smiled. "You'll do more than that, trust me." By the time the sun began to set, the house already looked better. The walls were patched, the door stood firm, and the place felt alive again. Anna came outside carrying glasses of lemonade for everyone. She looked at the men working in her yard and whispered, "I can't believe strangers would do this." Daniel took the glass and said, "We're not strangers anymore." That night, as the bikers packed up their tools, Noah hugged Daniel tightly. "Thank you," he said softly. "I don't know what I'd do if you hadn't stopped that day." Daniel looked down at him and said, "You reminded us what really matters, kid. Don't ever lose that heart of yours." As the bikers rode off into the orange glow of sunset, Noah stood by the gate waving until they disappeared down the road. Inside the house, his mother sat quietly by the window, watching her son smile for the first time in a long while. And for Daniel and his crew, that feeling, the one that came from helping someone without expecting anything back, stayed with them long after the road carried them away. The next morning, the bikers arrived at the small house again, just as the sun was rising. The air was cool and the grass was still wet with dew. Daniel parked his bike near the fence and looked around. The house didn't look broken anymore. It looked like it was waking up just like the morning. Noah came running out the door, waving both hands. "You came back," he shouted with excitement. He was wearing the same jacket as before, but his face looked brighter now. There was a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there the first day. Daniel smiled. "Of course we did. We said we'd finish this, remember?" Anna came out a moment later holding a small tray of coffee cups. Her steps were still slow, but her smile was stronger. "You men have done so much already," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Daniel said. "You let us help." The bikers started working again, one fixing the roof, another painting the walls, and a couple of them cleaning the backyard. Noah followed Daniel around, handing him nails and tools, always eager to help. Every now and then he'd ask a question about the bikes or talk about school. "My mom used to tell me that things would get better," he said while holding a hammer for Daniel. "But it's been a long time since they did." Daniel stopped for a second, looked at the boy, and said quietly, "Sometimes they get better when you least expect it. You just have to keep going even when it feels like nothing's changing." The boy nodded, thinking about it. By noon, the group took a short break. Anna brought out sandwiches and lemonade. Everyone sat on the grass, laughing and talking like they had known each other for years. There was no sense of pity, just warmth, real human kindness. As they ate, one of the bikers, a man named Luis, looked at Daniel and said, "You know, this feels good. We should do this more often, help people who need it." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing." After lunch, Daniel went inside to check something in the kitchen. He noticed that the fridge was nearly empty again. He turned to Anna and asked, "You have enough groceries?" She gave a small shrug. "What you brought last time helped a lot. I'll stretch it for as long as I can." Daniel didn't say anything right away. He could tell she was used to surviving with very little. He looked around the small living room. There were no decorations, no fancy things, just a few old photos and a blanket draped over the couch. But everything was neat and clean. It showed pride, even in struggle. He turned to her and said gently, "You used to work in a hospital, right?" "Yes," she said, her voice quiet. "I was a nurse. But when the hospital closed, I couldn't find another job. No car, no savings, and after I got sick, things just went downhill." Daniel nodded, trying to imagine how hard it must have been. "You ever thought of working from home? Something small? Maybe helping people around here?" She smiled weakly. "I've thought about it, but no one really hires around this area. Still, I'm trying to get better. I'll find a way." Before Daniel could answer, Noah came running inside, holding a paintbrush dripping with white paint. "Mom, look at the wall. It's like new." Anna laughed, the sound soft but full of joy. "You'll get paint all over the floor," she said, but her eyes shone with pride. Daniel smiled at the sight. "He's a good kid," he said quietly. "He is," Anna said, watching her son run back outside. "He's the reason I keep fighting. The rest of the day went by quickly. The bikers repaired the windows, patched the back wall, and even fixed a small leak in the bathroom. Every little improvement made the house feel more alive. Neighbors started noticing too. A few stopped by to see what was happening. Some offered to lend a hand, while others just smiled and waved. At one point, a woman from the next street brought over a bag of old clothes for Noah. "My boy's outgrown these," she said kindly. "Maybe he can use them." Anna was touched. "Thank you," she said, her eyes wet. "You didn't have to do that." The woman smiled. "You've got good people looking out for you now. That's something special." By evening, the house looked completely different. The walls were bright, the porch was sturdy, and the yard was clean. The bikers stood together, covered in sweat and paint, admiring the work. Noah ran up and hugged Daniel around the waist. "It's beautiful." "Thank you." Daniel patted his shoulder. "You helped make it happen, remember? You don't owe us thanks." Anna came out again, her eyes red from crying. "I wish I had the right words," she said softly. "You've given us more than a house. You've given us hope." Daniel didn't know what to say. He just smiled and said, "You deserve it. Everyone deserves a fair shot." That night, as the bikers packed up their things, Daniel lingered for a moment, staring at the little house glowing under the porch light. He thought about all the places they had been, long roads, big cities, empty highways, and realized that this small moment, right here, meant more than all of them combined. On the ride back, no one said much. The air was cool and the stars were beginning to show. But inside, each of them felt something shift. They had come to help a stranger and ended up finding something they didn't even know they were missing: a sense of purpose. When they stopped at a diner on the edge of town, Troy looked at Daniel and said, "You know, man, this thing we did, it feels different." "Like it wasn't just about fixing a house," Daniel nodded. "It wasn't. It was about fixing what's been missing in the world. Too many people look away when someone's hurting." Luis leaned back in his chair. "Maybe we should start something. You know, a small group. Help folks like that. We've got tools, hands, and time. Why not?" Daniel smiled, looking around at his friends. "Maybe that's exactly what we'll do." Back at the house, Noah couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring at the moonlight hitting the newly painted wall. His mom walked in and tucked the blanket around him. "They really changed everything, didn't they?" he said sleepily. She smiled. "They did. But you changed everything first. If you hadn't gone to that gas station..." He looked up at her. "I just wanted you to eat, Mom." She kissed his forehead. "And because of that, we got more than food. We got family." Outside, the night was quiet, but it felt alive and like something good had finally settled into the air. The next morning, the bikers returned again, this time without tools. They brought breakfast, pancakes, eggs, and coffee, and sat together on the porch. Anna laughed more than she had in months, and Noah showed off his fixed bike, riding in circles in the yard. Daniel watched him and smiled. "You're fast," he called out. Noah grinned. "I told you I'd be." For the first time, there was no heaviness in his voice, just joy. Later that day, as they got ready to leave, Daniel pulled something from the truck, a box with a small heater inside. "For the cold nights," he said. Anna shook her head, speechless. "You've done enough," Daniel smiled. "This is just a start." As they rode away once again, the sun warm on their backs, Daniel knew he'd be back soon. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. That small boy and his mother had reminded him what real strength looked like, and though he didn't say it out loud in his heart, he knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning of something bigger, something that would soon touch more lives than any of them could imagine. When the sun rose the next morning, the small house looked the same from the outside, but something inside it had changed. For the first time in months, the smell of warm food filled the air. There was laughter, quiet but real, echoing between the cracked walls. Liam's mother sat on the edge of the old couch, holding a bowl of soup in her hands. Her eyes were tired but full of life again. She looked at Liam and said softly, "I can't believe they did all this for us." Liam smiled and shrugged. "They said they just wanted to help. They even fixed the door and brought groceries." She nodded slowly, tears forming again. "Kindness. It still exists." While they ate, there was a knock at the door. Liam jumped up, half expecting one of the bikers. When he opened it, there stood Ryan, the same biker who had spoken to him the day before. He had 2 big bags in his hands and a small box tucked under his arm. "Morning, champ," Ryan said with a grin. "We thought you might need a few more things." Liam's eyes widened. "You already brought so much." Ryan shook his head. "You deserve a bit more. We bikers had a meeting last night. Everyone chipped in. We couldn't stop thinking about you and your mom." He stepped inside and placed the bags on the small table. Inside were more groceries, a blanket, and even a few clothes. But then he handed the small box to Liam. "This one's for you," Ryan said. Liam opened it carefully. Inside was a brand new helmet, black with blue stripes, and a folded note that said, "For your next ride, keep believing." Liam stared at it, speechless. I don't know what to say." Ryan patted his shoulder. "Just promise me something. Stay in school, keep helping your mom, and never give up. That's all we want." Liam nodded, and something in his chest felt lighter. As Ryan was about to leave, Liam's mother came closer. She thanked him quietly, her voice shaking with emotion. "You don't know what this means to us," she said. Ryan smiled. "I think I do, ma'am. Sometimes all it takes is a small act of kindness to change a life. You've both got a big future ahead. Just don't stop believing in it." After he left, Liam sat down by the window and watched the bikers ride off down the dusty road. For the first time, he didn't see them as tough men in leather jackets. He saw them as protectors, people who cared when no one else did. Later that afternoon, Liam took the old bike outside. It was still rusted and wobbly, but now it felt different. He cleaned it, oiled the chain, and decided he wouldn't sell it after all. It was no longer a sign of struggle. It had become a reminder of hope. As the days went by, life began to slowly shift. The bikers kept checking in every few days. Sometimes they brought food, sometimes they just stayed to chat. Liam's mom began to feel stronger again, and she even started sewing for a local store to earn a small income. One afternoon, when the air was cool and quiet, the bikers showed up again, this time with big smiles and a surprise that left Liam speechless. "Come outside," one of them shouted. Liam ran out and froze in disbelief. Parked by the curb was a shiny second-hand bike, red with black tires and a small note tied to the handlebar. It read, "Keep riding toward your dreams." Liam looked up at them, tears filling his eyes. "You did this for me?" Ryan chuckled. "You earned it, kid. You never gave up, and you reminded us what it means to keep fighting." He turned to the group. "Remember what we said, boys? Kindness is the best ride you'll ever take." The bikers laughed and clapped. Liam's mom stood by the doorway, wiping her tears but smiling proudly. That evening, Liam sat beside the new bike, staring at the fading sunset. "Mom," he said softly, "do you think good people still exist?" She smiled. "They never stopped existing, sweetheart. Sometimes you just have to cross paths with the right ones." As the sun went down, Liam thought back to that day when he had stood on the street, trying to sell his bike just to feed his mother. He remembered the cold air, the fear in his heart, and the moment he met Ryan. He realized that one act of kindness could truly change everything. But what Liam didn't know was that this was just the beginning. A few days later, Ryan and his biker friends returned, not to bring food or clothes this time, but to talk about something bigger. They had an idea. Ryan gathered Liam and his mom at the small table and said, "We've been thinking. There are a lot of kids like you around here. Strong, hardworking, just stuck in tough times. We want to start something that can help more families like yours." Liam blinked, unsure what he meant. "Like a charity?" "Sort of," Ryan said. "We call it Ride for Hope. We're starting a community ride. Donations go to helping local families." "You and your mom inspired it." Liam looked stunned. "We did?" Ryan nodded. "You reminded us what real strength looks like. You reminded us that sometimes all someone needs is a little help." Liam's mom covered her mouth, trying not to cry. "You have no idea what this means to us." Ryan smiled warmly. "Actually, I think we do." Word spread quickly. Within a week, people around town started hearing about Ride for Hope. Bikers from nearby cities joined in. Local shops donated supplies, and even schools got involved. Liam helped design the flyers with old markers, and his mom helped sew small patches for the riders' jackets. The first ride took place a few weeks later. Dozens of bikes lined up along the main road, engines rumbling as the crowd gathered. Liam stood at the front wearing his new helmet, watching in awe. Ryan called him over. "You ready to lead the ride with us, kid?" Liam's eyes widened. Me? Of course, Ryan said. This all started because of you. The crowd cheered as Liam got on his bike, the red one they had given him, and rode beside Ryan. They took off together, the sound of engines echoing through the town, carrying a message of kindness and hope wherever they went. For the first time in a long while, Liam felt truly free. He wasn't the boy trying to sell his bike anymore. He was the boy who helped start something bigger than himself, something that made people believe in goodness again. As the ride ended and people clapped, Ryan leaned over and said, "You see, Liam, sometimes the hardest roads lead to the best destinations." Liam nodded with a smile. "I think you're right, sir," Ryan grinned. "Don't call me sir, call me brother." That night when Liam and his mom sat under the stars outside their small house, there was peace in their hearts. The bikers had brought more than just food and gifts. They had brought friendship, dignity, and a reminder that even when life feels unfair, kindness can rewrite the story. Liam leaned against his mom's shoulder and whispered, "I'll never forget them." She smiled softly. "And they'll never forget you." The next few months brought changes that no one in town had expected. What began as a small act of kindness had grown into something much bigger, something that touched lives far beyond that little neighborhood. The Ride for Hope movement kept growing. Every weekend, the sound of engines filled the streets, not in anger or noise, but in purpose. Bikers rode together, raising money for families who had lost their homes, for kids who couldn't afford school books, and for mothers struggling just like Liam's mom once had. Liam became a familiar face among them. Though he was still young, everyone treated him like part of the group. He wasn't the shy boy who once tried to sell his old bike anymore. He was now the one who stood at the front, cheering, helping, and inspiring. Ryan often joked, "You're our little leader now." Liam would laugh, shaking his head. "I just helped a little." But everyone knew the truth. He had done much more than that. One chilly morning, as they were preparing for another charity ride, Liam's mom came out holding a small brown envelope. She handed it to Ryan and said, "I want to donate this." Ryan looked confused. "You don't have to do that," she smiled. "I want to. I started earning again from sewing work. This is from me, to help someone else who might be hungry tonight." Ryan didn't say a word for a moment. He just looked at her, touched by her gesture. Then he nodded. "You're part of the heart of this, ma'am." "Thank you." That day, the bikers rode further than usual. They passed through small towns, handing out food, warm clothes, and letters of encouragement. People waved at them from windows. Children ran to the roadside, smiling and clapping. And everywhere they went, people asked about the story, how it all began. Ryan always said the same thing. It started with a boy who didn't give up on kindness, even when life gave him no reason to hope. Liam would blush every time he heard that. But deep down, it made him proud. As months turned into a year, things at home got better. The house, once broken and quiet, now had color again. The roof had been fixed and the walls were painted a soft blue, thanks to the bikers who helped during weekends. His mother's health had improved, and her small sewing business was slowly growing. Sometimes at night, she'd sit outside with Liam watching the stars. "Do you remember the day you met Ryan?" she'd ask. He would nod, smiling at the memory. "I'll never forget it. I thought they were scary at first," she laughed softly. "And look where we are now." Life has a strange way of turning pain into blessings. One evening, when they were sitting by the porch, Ryan stopped by again, this time without his bike. He came walking, carrying a thick folder. Liam looked curious. "What's that?" Ryan smiled and handed it to him. "It's for you. You're old enough now to start thinking about what's next." Liam opened the folder and saw school forms and a letter. It was a scholarship application, fully paid for by a fund the bikers had started in his name. He looked up, shocked. "You're kidding, right?" Ryan shook his head. "No joke. You've earned this." We spoke with a few schools. One of them has a program for kids like you. They were moved by your story. Liam's mother gasped, her hands trembling. "You mean he can go to a real school?" Ryan smiled warmly. "Yes, ma'am. Everything's taken care of. Supplies, fees, uniform. It's all covered." Liam's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you." Ryan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just keep being who you are. That's all the thanks we need." The next few weeks passed quickly as they prepared for his new chapter. The bikers visited often. bringing little gifts, notebooks, pens, even a small backpack with their club's logo on it. They said it was so he'd never forget where he came from. On the morning of his first day, the whole group showed up outside his house. Their bikes lined the street, engines roaring softly in the cool air. Liam stood on the porch nervous but excited, wearing his clean new uniform. Ryan handed him a helmet. "You ready for your next ride?" Liam smiled. Always. The bikers escorted him all the way to the school gates. Other students stopped and stared as the line of bikes pulled up. It was a sight no one would forget. When they said goodbye, Ryan leaned down and whispered, "Remember, this world can be rough, but you've already proven you can handle it. Keep your heart kind, that's your real strength." Liam nodded, his eyes bright with emotion. "I will." As the bikes drove away, the sound faded slowly, replaced by the chatter of students and the ringing school bell. Liam took a deep breath and walked in, carrying more than just his books. He carried the story of kindness, hope, and a second chance. Over the next few months, Liam worked hard in school. He loved studying, especially subjects that helped him understand how to fix things: machines, bikes, tools. He wanted to become a mechanic someday, maybe even open a workshop with Ryan's help. Every weekend, he'd still meet the bikers for the charity rides. The bond they shared never faded. They were more than friends. They were family. Years passed quietly, and Liam grew into a young man. The shy boy who once stood in the street, desperate to sell his bike, had become someone others looked up to. He helped mentor younger kids, taught them how to repair old bicycles, and often told them, "No matter how hard it gets, there's always someone out there who cares. You just have to keep believing." One afternoon, as he stood at his small workshop, now filled with bikes, tools, and laughter, a familiar sound reached his ears. The low, powerful rumble of engines. He turned around and saw Ryan and the group riding toward him. They were older now, their hair grayer, but their smiles just as bright. Ryan got off his bike and walked over. "You did it, kid," he said proudly. "You made something out of nothing." Liam laughed, shaking his head. "No, we did it together." Ryan nodded slowly. "Maybe so. But it started with you." They stood there for a while, looking at the busy street, full of people, life, and hope. Children were riding small bikes, families walked by, and everything felt alive. Liam turned to Ryan and said, "Do you ever think about that day?" Ryan smiled softly. "Every time I start my bike." That evening, they all sat together in front of the workshop, sharing food and stories. The air was filled with laughter. The setting sun painted everything in golden light, as if the world itself was proud of what had come from one simple act of kindness. When it was time for them to leave, Ryan looked back at Liam and said, "Remember, the road ahead never ends. Just keep riding and keep helping others find their way." Liam smiled and nodded. "I promise." As the bikers disappeared down the road, Liam stood quietly, holding his old rusty bike, the same one that had started it all. He had kept it all these years. It was no longer a broken memory of hardship. It was a symbol of how far they had come. He whispered to himself, "Please buy my bike, mister," and then laughed softly, shaking his head. That line really did change everything. He placed the bike in the corner of his workshop, where it would always remind him and everyone who walked in that kindness has power. No matter how small an act, it can spark something big. It can turn strangers into family. It can feed the hungry, lift the broken, and heal what pain tries to destroy. And sometimes it can all begin with a boy, a bike, and a few words spoken from the heart. And the small town that once struggled in silence had changed in more ways than anyone expected. The Ride for Hope project had grown far beyond what Ryan or the bikers ever imagined. What started as a few men trying to help a hungry boy and his mother had turned into a community that now cared for one another. Liam, now in his 20s, stood outside his small workshop with a soft smile. The place was busy, filled with bikes, customers, and the sound of tools clinking. The sign above the door read, "Hope Garage," the name chosen by Ryan himself before he retired from long rides. Every wall inside told a story. Photos of charity rides, thank you letters from families they had helped, and a framed picture of a young Liam standing beside his rusty old bike, grinning from ear to ear. That bike still stood in the corner, untouched, just as it was years ago. Liam could never bring himself to fix it. It was a reminder of struggle, kindness, and the moment everything changed. One quiet morning while he was cleaning a few old parts, a knock came on the door. A young boy about 12 stood there with a small broken scooter in his hand. His clothes were old and his eyes were full of worry. "Are you the man who fixes things?" the boy asked softly. Liam smiled. "That's me. What's wrong with it?" "It won't start," the boy said. "And my mom uses it to get to work." Liam looked at the scooter and then at the boy. "You came to the right place. Don't worry, I'll take care of it." The boy nodded but hesitated. "I don't have money." "Not much anyway. I can give you this." He pulled out 2 crumpled dollars from his pocket. Liam paused, feeling a familiar ache in his chest. That moment reminded him of his younger self, standing on a street, desperate to sell his bike to feed his mom. He gently pushed the money back into the boy's hand. "You keep that. Just help me by holding the tools, all right?" The boy's eyes brightened. "Really? Really?" Liam said, smiling. "Sometimes the best payment is good company." They worked side by side for nearly an hour. The boy watched closely, asking questions, learning how the small engine worked. When the scooter finally started again, the sound made the boy jump with joy. "Wow, you fixed it," he said, beaming. Liam laughed softly. "Told you it could be done." The boy looked at him seriously and said, "I'm going to help people too when I grow up." Liam's heart warmed. "That's the best thing you could ever do." Before leaving, the boy turned back and said, "Thank you, sir. My mom will be so happy." After he left, Liam stood quietly for a moment. The sunlight fell on the old bike in the corner, and he felt something deep inside, a peaceful kind of happiness. The same kindness that once saved him was now flowing through him into others. Later that day, Ryan stopped by the garage. His hair was grayer now and he walked a little slower, but his smile hadn't changed. "Still fixing hearts through engines, huh?" Ryan said with a chuckle. Liam laughed. "Guess I learned from the best." Ryan looked around the shop, his eyes scanning the photos and the small trophies from charity rides. "You've built something beautiful here." Liam nodded. "I just wanted to give back what you gave me." Ryan patted his shoulder. "You did more than that, son. You turned kindness into legacy." They sat outside the shop, sipping coffee as the sun dipped behind the hills. Kids rode past on bikes, laughing, and the town seemed alive in a way it hadn't been before. Ryan leaned back and sighed. "You know, when we met, I thought I was helping a kid who needed food. I didn't realize that kid would end up helping the world." Liam smiled. "You gave me hope. That's what started it all." Ryan looked at him for a long moment and said softly, "Maybe. But you kept it going." That night, when Liam closed the shop, he stood by the old bike one more time. The seat was torn, the handles rusted, but it was still his favorite thing in the world. He gently ran his hand over it and whispered, "Thank you." The next morning he got an unexpected visit. A woman and her teenage daughter walked into the shop carrying flowers. They introduced themselves as the family of one of the kids who had been helped by the Ride for Hope Fund years ago. "We just wanted to say thank you," the woman said. "Your kindness gave us a second chance. My daughter's in college now. She wouldn't be there without your help." Liam's throat tightened. "That's all because of the community. We just started something small," the woman smiled. "Sometimes the smallest things are what change everything." After they left, Liam sat down and thought about how much had changed, not just for him, but for so many people. He picked up his notebook and started writing something new, an idea that had been sitting in his heart for a long time. Hope Garage Foundation to train young people in need. He wanted to teach kids how to fix bikes, scooters, and small engines so they could earn an honest living just like he did. That evening, Ryan came by again, and Liam showed him the idea. Ryan read it slowly, then smiled wide. "You've got my full support. Let's do it," and they did. Within months, they had a small training area set up behind the workshop. Kids from nearby neighborhoods started showing up, curious and eager to learn. Liam taught them everything he knew, not just about tools and machines, but about life, patience, and the power of kindness. One day, during a lesson, a boy asked, "Why do you do all this?" "You don't charge us anything." Liam paused and smiled. "Because once someone did the same for me." He didn't tell them the full story right then, but they could feel the truth behind his words. As the years went by, The Hope Garage Foundation became well known. People from nearby towns came to see how one man and a group of bikers turned a moment of pain into something so beautiful. Liam's mom, now older but healthy and proud, often visited the garage. She'd sit by the window watching her son teach and smile. Sometimes she'd whisper, "You kept your promise, my boy. You never stopped believing." One afternoon after a long training session, Liam sat outside again watching the sunset. Ryan sat beside him silent for a while before saying, "You ever think about how different things could have been if we hadn't stopped that day?" Liam looked thoughtful. "All the time. Maybe I wouldn't be here. Maybe Mom wouldn't be here. Maybe none of this would exist," Ryan nodded. "And that's why we always stop, even when we're in a hurry. Because you never know whose life might need a little kindness." Liam smiled at that, knowing he'd carry those words forever. As evening turned to night, the sound of bikes echoed down the street again. New riders, younger ones, wearing jackets with the same Ride for Hope logo stitched on them. Liam stood up watching them pass, feeling proud that the torch had been passed on. He turned off the lights in the workshop, looked one last time at the old bike in the corner, and whispered, "We did it." The next morning, the garage was alive again. Laughter, chatter, the smell of oil and hope filling the air, and outside a small sign under the shop's name read, "Fixing Bikes, Building Dreams." Liam smiled every time he saw it, because he knew, long after he was gone, the story that began with a boy, a broken bike, and a simple plea for help would continue to ride on in the hearts of others, and maybe, somewhere out there, another child would whisper those same words, "Please buy my bike, mister," and find kindness waiting right around the corner, asked, and the small town that once struggled in silence had changed in more ways than anyone expected. The Ride for Hope project had grown far beyond what Ryan or the bikers ever imagined. What started as a few men trying to help a hungry boy and his mother had turned into a community that now cared for one another. Liam, now in his 20s, stood outside his small workshop with a soft smile. The place was busy, filled with bikes, customers, and the sound of tools clinking. The sign above the door read, "Hope Garage," the name chosen by Ryan himself before he retired from long rides. Every wall inside told a story. Photos of charity rides, thank you letters from families they had helped, and a framed picture of a young Liam standing beside his rusty old bike, grinning from ear to ear. That bike still stood in the corner untouched just as it was years ago. Liam could never bring himself to fix it. It was a reminder of struggle, kindness, and the moment everything changed. One quiet morning while he was cleaning a few old parts, a knock came on the door. A young boy about 12 stood there with a small broken scooter in his hand. His clothes were old and his eyes were full of worry. "Are you the man who fixes things?" the boy asked softly. Liam smiled. "That's me. What's wrong with it?" "It won't start," the boy said. "And my mom uses it to get to work." Liam looked at the scooter and then at the boy. "You came to the right place. Don't worry, I'll take care of it." The boy nodded but hesitated. "I don't have money." "Not much anyway. I can give you this." He pulled out 2 crumpled dollars from his pocket. Liam paused, feeling a familiar ache in his chest. That moment reminded him of his younger self, standing on a street, desperate to sell his bike to feed his mom. He gently pushed the money back into the boy's hand. "You keep that. Just help me by holding the tools, all right?" The boy's eyes brightened. "Really? Really?" Liam said, smiling. "Sometimes the best payment is good company." They worked side by side for nearly an hour. The boy watched closely, asking questions, learning how the small engine worked. When the scooter finally started again, the sound made the boy jump with joy. "Wow, you fixed it," he said, beaming. Liam laughed softly. "Told you it could be done." The boy looked at him seriously and said, "I'm going to help people too when I